Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the March 16th meeting of the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board of Directors. Before we call the roll, the meeting is to order. I wanted to make an announcement that on behalf of the board, I want to thank Margaret Pena for her service on the board. Margaret came on board, assimilated a whole lot of information very quickly, and was an absolute pleasure to work with. And it's with sadness that she has in the process of moving forward with in another area of interest that she has, and we're looking forward to that announcement soon. So Margaret, on behalf of myself, certainly, and I'm sure for all the board members, thank you very much for your service. I'd also like to announce that Ernie Camacho, after a probably about a 45-day holiday, rejoins the authority as a board member and retains his appointment also on the Finance and Audit Committee. So with those two announcements, I will ask the secretary to call the roll.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Director Shank.
Here.
Chair Richards.
Here.
Director Camacho.
Here.
Vice Chair Miller.
Here.
Assembly Member Arembula.
Here.
Director Perea.
Here.
Director Gilmetti.
Present.
Director Escutia.
Here.
Director Williams. Senator Gonzalez. Director Cohen.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Did you also call the roll for Director Arembula? You did? Okay, good.
Yes.
We didn't hear it. We were sorry. Thank you very much. We do have a quorum, and before we move on to public comment, as has been a policy, Ernie, I don't know, after 45 days of absence, if you want to address the board with anything, or you'd like to just move forward.
I'd just like to move forward. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, welcome back.
back.
I suspect part of the reason you're back is because we so glowingly provided tributes to you, and I think you're probably back for some more. So we're happy that you're back, Ernie.
It was embarrassing listening to them.
All right. We'll now move on to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Before we begin public comment for the California High-Speed Rail Board of Directors meeting, I would like to go over some important information. For members of the public who have joined in person and wish to provide public comment, you will be called upon in the order that we have received your card. If you're joining us via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're dialing in by phone, pressing the number 2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called upon in the order that their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue, your name is called. Please click the prompt at the screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, you will be called upon by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. When it is your turn to speak, please slowly and clearly say your name, first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak, and I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. Mr. Chair, we'll begin with the in-person speakers. Our first speaker is David Schwegel.
Good morning, Mr. Schwegel.
Good morning. My name is David Schwegel. I'm working with my colleague Brent Van Brocken down in San Diego to start a new nonprofit called North America for True High-Speed Rail, where we'll be putting a lot of emphasis on going on retreats such as at the Majestic Yosemite Hotel. We're tentatively looking at November. And the idea is we want to get people together to talk about some rather hot topics like What would it take to get a huge influx of federal funding to the tune of $50 billion or 11 days worth of defense spending in order to fast track this project so that we can get it up and running in advance of the Summer Olympics coming to Los Angeles in 2028? And second off, I want to emphasize the value of the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association. I actually drove 929 miles back in November 2019 up to Microsoft headquarters for an amazing party. We had outstanding keynote speakers that really drove the point home about Cascadia High-Speed Rail, with special emphasis on how they were able to get funding from the private sector. And I encourage us to partner with Cascadia High-Speed Rail to explore extraordinary opportunities. I also want to encourage attendance at the High-Speed Rail Association's May conference coming up May 16th to 17th in Washington, D.C. Specifically, this is a great opportunity to network with top-notch congressional representatives such as Seth Moulton, who has been a strong supporter of the project, and want to really emphasize the value of getting the project up and running sooner rather than later so that people will fall in love with the project and want to encourage much more investment in high-speed rail throughout the nation. So once again, David Schwagel, encouraging attendance and participation. Last time I looked at the docket, there were around 24 speakers that were confirmed. And it looks like Mr. CEO is among the many speakers that are confirmed. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Swiggle.
Mr. Chair, we'll now move to the Zoom participants. Once again, if you're joining the meeting, if you're joining the meeting via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of the screen. Or if you are dialing in by phone, pressing the number 2 will raise your hand and put you into the queue. Speakers will be called upon in the order that their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue and your name is called, please click the prompt at the bottom of your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak. I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. When it's your turn to speak, please speak slowly and clearly. Say your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. Mr. Chairman, our first speaker is Roland.
Good morning, Mr. Rebham.
Good morning, Director Roland Burbank, San Jose. I really want to share, my excitement about seeing Mr. Camacho rejoining the board. And moving forward, I really believe that this institutional knowledge is going to be invaluable to ensure that once we get to Bakersfield, we do not repeat the same mistakes that we made in downtown Fresno. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have no other attendees that would like to provide public comment.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to today's agenda. Item number 1 is the board's consideration of approving the February 16th board meeting minutes. We have a motion.
Second.
Please.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Please call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Abstain.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gilmetti,
Yes.
Director Escutia,
Yes.
Director Williams, Director Cohen.
Thank you. The item is passed unanimously with 1 abstention. Moving on to item number 2 is the expenditure authorization request. CFO Annis. Good morning.
Good morning, board members. Brian Annis, Chief Financial Officer, and I'm going to be co-presenting this item with our Deputy Chief Operating Officer, Daniel Horgan. We'll be trading off on slides. Next slide, please. As a high-level summary of this item, existing board policy 11-001 directs board approval of both the annual fiscal year budget and the multi-year program baseline budget. In December of 2021, the board last approved a multi-year budget when it approved an expenditure authorization of $17.9 billion. This is an action item today. Staff recommends the board approve a new expenditure authorization to allow important civil construction to advance on the 119-mile segment between Madera and Poplar Avenue, and to incorporate a $25 million federal raise grant that was awarded after the last expenditure authorization by the board. Staff anticipates coming back in the future for additional program baseline budget adjustments as additional federal grants are received, or as additional work is ready for procurement if that needs a change to the expenditure authorization. Next slide, please. So at the last board vote on the multi-year budget in December 21, there was acknowledgement that there was decisions still pending that might affect our program, that might affect our budget. One of those was the legislative appropriation of the remaining Prop 1A bond funds. At that time, 4.2 billion of bond appropriations were pending. And after that board action in 21, in June of 2022, the legislature did appropriate the full 4.2 billion of Prop 1A funds. So that has been resolved. We also indicated at the time that we're continuing to apply for federal grants. And in fact, we received that $25 million raise grant for design advancement on the Madera to Merced segment. Lastly, we pointed at multiple construction package 1, construction package 2, 3, commercial issues where we had significant design changes to our major structures. Those needed to be resolved, and resolving those would greatly reduce risk and inform our final budget to complete the work. Daniel Horgan's going to talk more about those. So in all these three areas, we have made advancements, received additional federal grants, received the Prop 1A funds. As anticipated, we're back. We're also coming with this timing because our existing contingencies are near exhaustion. So to continue the work, to continue to direct the contractor to begin work on new structures that have not yet been completed, utility work that's upcoming that requires more budget. We're coming to you now requesting an augmentation to the budget. I do want to say, however, that increasing costs for large capital projects is not unique in this current environment. The legislature, when they approved the Proposition 1A bonds last year, put an additional $2.5 billion to help our local partners, our regional partners, complete their capital construction projects. And in fact, the State Transportation Agency awarded this $2.5 billion last month. And it's going to projects such as the Caltrain electrification program to close a funding gap that project had. I know the ACE Forward project in the Central Valley received some money, as did some projects with LA Metro in the South. So we are have been through a high inflationary environment that's affected other projects in California and also internationally. The next slide. This is a summary of the current board-approved baseline budget. Again, at the bottom, you see the $17.9 billion total. We break it into about 6 line items. At the top is the $13.6 billion that's associated with construction on the 119-mile segment. We've segregated from that the $76 million amount that goes with the 2021 raise grant. in the city of Wasco to improve Highway 46 and how that road passes under both the freight railroad and the high-speed rail line. We have a phase 1 environmental balance. So this is our environmental clearance work outside the 119-mile segment, 841 million. Our bookend projects, 1.3 billion. Other funded scope, 1.9 billion. That includes things like our program-wide support, specific contingency items, reserves required by the federal grant, and also some historical phase 2 expenditures. Lastly, the board, when they adopted the last expenditure authorization, approved us going forward on design advancement on the Merced extension, the Bakersfield extension, and also executing design contracts for the 4 stations we'll be constructing in the Central Valley. So that was the 178 million, and all those contracts are now executed and the work is underway. I believe with the next slide, we transition to Mr. Horgan.
Good morning, Chair Richards and board members. Okay, so since December 21, the last expenditure authorization, the authority has actively engaged with all the contractors to resolve commercial issues and to agree revised baseline schedules. Whilst we were doing this, inflation escalation was at a 40-year high, which obviously increased costs. If we look at each one of the contracts, CP4 is the most advanced. The definition is almost 100% complete. That's in a very good position. And we signed 2 significant third-party agreements in the past month, which will ensure that this contract is complete in summer this year. CP1 and CP23 have been significantly defined as well. Most of the major commercial issues and scope additions have been included. They are probably at the state of definition that CP4 was 1 year ago. In the past year, Brian Ennis and myself at the F&A committee have updated the F&A committee on contingency balances and change orders as we execute them. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, finishing the 119-mile segment. Okay, here we're in a good position. In terms of land, we're now at 96% of all land provided to the design build contractors to complete this work. And similarly with utilities, we're at 53% utilities relocated. In terms of estimations, we've got our new estimates incorporate all the construction work, updates to include final designs. Utility designs are at almost 90% as well. We've obviously agreed new schedules with the contractors, CP1, CP23, and CP4. And obviously COVID has played its part as well in impacting schedules. So in the next slides, I'm going to talk specifically about CP1, CP23, and CP4. But there are 3 issues that are really driving the cost increases. The first one is the higher global escalation and inflation, which we all experience. The second one is scope. This is scope as we define the job, refined it, got into the utility designs. There's been additional requirements from third parties. We're very close to the end of that. And then we've made provision for additional contingency as well for all of these changes. Next slide, please.
Daniel,
Yes.
may I stop? Can we
Of
go
course.
back to that last slide?
Yes.
You know, I hear over and over again, Brian Anna said, and you're saying now, higher inflation, global inflation, but that really didn't start until after 2020. 2021, we took a jump from 1.4% of inflation to about 7% in 21. 22, it was reduced to about 6.5%, and projected into 23 is about 2.7%. So our cost didn't start to rise because of inflation. It started before the inflation started. So what were the elements that caused that the cost to rise to become higher in the past years?
I think, Ernie, if you recall, during 2022, we executed a significant number of very large change orders including the intrusion protection barrier for CP23, which was 144 million. Then we executed the Hanford superstructure, which was 244 million. And we executed the Deer Creek change order, which was 205 million. In addition, we executed 5 or 6 significant change orders in CP1, which would total almost 600 million. They were all negotiated during 2022, when escalation was just taking off and nobody could predict at that stage where it was going to end. So there was significant risk.
And I agree with you with that. But if we look at where our cost originated, we had, just looking at CP1 for a second, CP1 started with a original bid back in whatever that date was, somewhere around $1 billion or so. Right now we're at 500% greater cost, 5 times that. CP23 is closer to $6 billion. So we're at about 4 times their bid. So much of those costs were not spent just in 22. They were a result of the years prior to that. So was it the method of contract that we use? I know that we're using a design bid, and I hope that we learn from our past mistakes in going forward with that type of mechanism to contract out. Design bid has not been fruitful for us in moving forward. And it certainly has cost us a great deal of money.
Ernie and this is Tom. I agree with that. I think this is worth delving into a bit more right now. And I think your point's well taken with regards to the term of the inflation that Mr. Horgan has mentioned. So, Brian, do you want to add some more to that, Brian Kelly?
Yeah, I think the question is a very good one, and it's something that we've talked about at this board in prior hearings, and particularly as we've done construction updates, and certainly into the last presentation last month, where we talked about where we are in the project update report. And so I think this history is very important because this is the single most important lesson learned for the board, I think for management as we go forward on this project. And that is fundamentally the driver of the costs since the time the contracts were awarded come down to really 2 important elements. One is that not enough pre-construction work was done prior to the contracts being awarded, which means particularly in a design build project, you have awarded a contract and then you are finishing work like right-of-way procurement, design, utility relocations, and finalizing third-party agreements. Candidly, that is out of sequence. And we've learned that lesson the very hardest way you can possibly learn that lesson. Because when you start to then update and complete that work after the contracts are awarded, that is when the scope is realized. When you finish design, when you finish right-of-way, when you finish third-party agreements, and you do it after the contract, then you see the impacts on the scope. And when we define the scope finally, with all of that stuff done, then you see the impacts, and that's what we have come back to the board with first in December of 21, and now today, finalizing what it looks like from the work that wasn't done sequentially in the right order before. And again, as we look forward on future construction contracts, like our extension to Bakersfield or extensions to Merced, we are doing it differently. We are now, with the board's direction, we have entered already the early design advancement to bring those designs out to what we call configuration footprint, or 30%. In that process, we identify 100% of the right-of-way we will need. We identify the utilities that need to be relocated. We identify all the third-party agreements that are needed, and we execute those before we enter the next construction contracts. And then we have to align the right procurement method. Is it design build? Is it design bid build? Is it construction management general contractor? There are various ways we can go at this, and we want to align the best procurement to the best need. And we probably want to do smaller contracts going forward. We do not have to bite off 65-mile stretches or 32-mile stretches. We can do them in smaller bites, get more bidders, and execute this stuff more efficiently. That's what we've learned. It's taken a long time to learn it, but that's why we are where we are. We understand this, and we're practicing things differently going forward.
Well, thank you for
Chairman,
that.
I if Mr. Camacho's finished, Mr. Chairman, I have some questions on this issue of change orders.
Sure, I'll make sure that I get to you next, Martha.
All right.
Ernie, did you have anything else?
Well, I just wanted to just get some clarification. We're looking at the 119 miles, which is part of our agreement. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, now in the ARA agreement, and I'm not sure about this, but in the original ARA agreement, what we were supposed to do is to design and have something with track installed. So is that still part of our plan? And if so, have we taken those costs into consideration?
Yes.
But we have not, now we're just putting out a bid for tracking systems. How are we going to segregate those two?
I'm not sure I understand the question. How are we going to segregate which?
Well, are we going to segregate?
In the estimated cost for the 119 miles is the tracking systems.
The cost that's in front of us right now is to complete the civil works
Yeah.
with risk contingency at what we call a probability 65% level. That's
So
what we
this
have
is-
in front of us now.
Yeah.
In the project update report, we outlined all the costs, including the cost that we estimate for the tracking systems. I would say that unlike how we did tracking systems or started to do it in 2019 in a procurement that we ultimately canceled, my expectation is that going forward, we're going to do it in a more segmented way. We will do smaller bites on how to move the track forward, because we now know that there's a time difference between when the CP4 commercial work will be done or construction work will be done and when CPs 1 and 2, 3 will be done. So we probably want to start track installation sooner on CP4, extend it as far as we can, and then wait for the civils to complete on the others before we add it there. So it's not part of this budget augmentation specifically, but it's in our broader budget, which we've outlined in the project update report.
I guess that's where my question was heading, is this request including the tracking, which is not. And so this is just for civil work.
That's correct.
Okay. And I just want to make sure the board is aware of that. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Ernie. Director Escutia?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, I think, Ernie brings up the issue that we discussed last time in the board meeting, or maybe it was 2 board meetings ago, in which I remember very clearly Director Lynn Schenk said that we really must concentrate with a laser focus. Those were her words, concentrate with a laser focus on just building the 119 miles, obviously targeted there. And let's just do it. That's the test track, and that's the obligation that we have owed upon ourselves as a result of the ARA agreement. So I really, really, do hope that we go back to that, that comment made by Ms. Schenk, that the 119 miles are the first priority. I'm even willing to tell you as a Southerner that I don't care about any additional resources to Southern California. Let's just save money and concentrate on the 119 miles. And right now, as a non-transportation person, but as a citizen, I'm very scared because of change orders that I'm not aware of. I don't know, for the CP1 to go from less than $1 billion to now over $5 billion, a 500% increase in heaven knows what, couple of years, is just stunning. And I, as a board member, would want to have greater anticipated knowledge of these change orders, where they're headed, and what we are doing. And I'm glad to see that in Mr. Annis's presentation on page 15, one of the bullets there on page 15 of his presentation, the bullet says increase governance for change orders and dispute resolution. To me, when I read the words governance, I assume that maybe it includes the board to be involved in how these change orders are determined, because right now I feel, as I indicated, very scared. I feel that there's a big, amount of money out there lurking that's somehow not accounted for here. And I would like to state that, this effort towards increased governance involving change orders is one that truly incorporates the board members as much as possible. I mean, even if we could have a special session to just discuss change orders, both past as well as present, as well as anticipated, that I think would be very helpful so that we're not caught basically reading the newspaper and like, oh my God, there's more anticipated costs in this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Scatia.
few questions, comments.
Yes, Director Perea.
Yeah, thank you. And Member Scuti, just to pick up on one thing you said right now. By policy, we did move a lot of discretion on change orders based on a threshold to administration. We can change that policy and either reduce the amount or just require that all change orders come to the board, and whether they come to the board or they come in a special committee, subcommittee, I mean, that's for us to decide. But if the board wishes to have more discretion, we need to return back to eliminating the policy that gave away some of the discretion that we have. But my main point that I want to talk about on this page 6 is, I agree with what Brian indicated in terms of process moving forward. I'm very comfortable with how we're moving forward with construction, but it seems like the 119 miles CP1 especially seemed to be the thorn in our side that the cost has just gone out of control. But I agree also with the Member Shank's comment about being laser focused on CP1. We have to be, or we won't finish. And I know on this particular slide, it says we've completed 53% of utility relocations, which is good, with another 21% underway. But I think in tying it to the agenda item, and of course, completing construction, last month we did talk about it, and I hope all board members did receive a copy of, and I know they were sent a copy of the document that we had requested with respect to just CP1, what the outstanding issues were in a breakdown of showing what had been completed, what was in progress, and what had not yet started. And if I can just go to, and this is a Brian Annis question, and Brian, I apologize. I sent you an email this morning indicating I was going to ask you this question when we did F&A, but it seems it may be more appropriate now. In PG&E, just for example, we have 144 projects that are not started yet, utility relocations, and we have 29 in progress. Wet utilities, we have 63 not started and 115 in progress. So my question to you, and it'll be my monthly question, is how are we moving the needle on those particular issues, including AT&T and telecom? Because if we can't definitively say when we are going to complete those or where we are in progress, we're going to be seeing a lot of change orders, a lot of delays, a lot of cost increases. So it's good to say, the 53% completed and 21% underway, but that really doesn't tell us anything. And so my question to all of you is, to staff, is based on the numbers that we received last month, how have we moved the needle in each of those areas for AT&T, PG&E, wet utilities, and telecom?
It's a good question, Henry. So we have appointed Dennis Kim as he's the director of right of way, but now he is also the executive in charge of third parties. So Dennis is putting together a detailed strategy for every single utility, all the precursor activities, what we need to do to get each one moved. And that plan is near finalization, and we intend to incorporate more detail in future Central Valley status reports, which will be read out to the F&A committee on a monthly basis.
I'll just add to that, Henry, I'll just add to that, we have formed at the management level, we formed a third-party task force. Dennis is chairing that work right now. We identified in that 66 broad third-party issues that we've had to work through. We'll populate that further when we get further along on the strategy that he is putting together for all the third-party matters. But of those 66 issues, I believe as of yesterday, 67 issues that were on that tracker, as of yesterday, 64 of them were completed. 3 are outstanding. One of them I'm in direct dialogue with senior people at AT&T about. You're right, there are several independent issues that are PG&E related that we are working through. And I'm happy to bring back to the board more detail on the specific utility by utility approach that we're making toward this. The other area is with our freight partners, namely UP, that mostly affects CP1. And we have advanced some important things in the last couple of weeks with them to allow us to move forward on the intrusion protection barrier work, it's called the missing 2.5 mile work. And finally, we got them to approve something on the status of, for lack of a better word, the status of dirt on the Tulare underpass, which with that approved, that work is now beginning as well. So we're very focused on the third party issues. You are correct to say that is the precursor work that must be done for us to advance the construction. And we're putting together a more detailed strategy on how we'll move each of the utilities. But we do have in place now a task force on this. We're evaluating the key issues. We have an escalation ladder in place that sometimes comes all the way up to me with senior executives from the utilities. And we are making progress on this like we haven't before.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Okay.
Director Shank.
Thank you, Brian, and appreciate all the work staff is doing. The only
Say again, Henry, I'm sorry.
can I just finish my last
Yep.
comment here? Brian, I do appreciate all the work the staff is doing, and if I could just ask Daniel, when you complete that report, I mean, that's fine to send it to F&A, but that report should go to every board member, not just F&A. Okay?
Yes.
And you know, at least from my perspective, I don't need to see all the nuts and bolts of what all the staff work is being completed. That's your bailiwick. What I'm interested in is, again, the document that staff prepared and gave us at the last meeting for these 4 entities. And again, I'll just use PG&E as an example. What I want to know is, of the 144 that were not started as of last month, when I get that report, I'd like to say, or at least see, of that 144, are they still not started, or have 20 started? And then I just need to see a date, you know, when it started, when do you think it's going to be done? And that's really all I need to know. I don't need to know all the work you're doing. That's your thing. But I think the board really needs to see this on a monthly basis. If we don't move this needle, we're going to be sitting here 2 years from now still saying CP1's not much further along. So we need
Henry,
to stay.
Henry, we will update that document and get it to the board before the next hearing. Okay.
Before when?
Before the next hearing.
Hearing. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Director Perea. Director Shank.
Yeah, Henry, thank you, because those are exactly the issues that I wanted covered, and I appreciate the underscoring that needs to come to the whole board, not just those of you on F&A, because hearkening back, Brian, to what you said about the mistakes we made in the past, this is very much a part of it, and especially with the utility relocation issues, you know, too painful to recount, and I won't do it, but just to echo strongly what Director Perea has asked for as a real top priority in terms of reporting to the full board. So thank you for that, Henry.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, any other comments or questions from board members at this point? All right.
You know,
thank you.
Tom, one
Yes.
additional thing, I'm sorry. You know, the issue of change orders is very important to all of us, but I think it is incumbent on management and staff to address the concerns of Director Escudia. And, you know, and we do have a new director. I won't call Ernie a new director, but Director Cohn, so that we bring people to, if not a comfort level, a baseline level of where we are on change orders. And so if the staff or management could come up with a reasonable way of bringing in, and I know, we have to be careful of special meetings and how many directors meet at one time. But for those who would like to participate in something where we get a tutorial, or maybe that's too pejorative, but a back and forth on the change order so that everybody is at a comfort level that they understand where we've been, where we are, and where we're going on it.
Thank
Director
you,
Schenk,
Director Schenk. I really appreciate that, and I agree with her comments. That would be so wonderful for us to get some kind of comfort level and not be running scared. At least I'm running scared as to what's to be expected in future change orders.
Director Schenk, and Director Escutia, if I could just say to that, I would remind the board that in September of 2021, we restructured how we do the change order process, involved bringing in a control change committee. That process includes an escalation element of what level of change order gets approved by what level of management, and what our reporting requirements are with the board. So why don't we, again, we can do it at the next hearing, or we can do it in between, however the board wants to do it. But I'm happy to go through where we are on that process and exactly every element of that process for how we deal with change orders. I do want to remind the board, and I want to be clear with the public as well, because we executed a contract for the 119 miles for each of the construction packages, and we made scope changes after that contract. Everything we do requires a change order. Everything we do requires a change order. So I just want to be clear that change orders are being executed because things changed after the contract was let. And what we are doing is we're getting all of that scope in the contract and executing it to completion. And the only way we can do that is through change order. And so I want to set expectations like you all do. Change orders are here, and they will be here until the work is done, because we are defining things after the fact. And that's, again, that's the lesson from the 119 that we will not continue going forward. But the good news is we're toward the end of that definition. We have almost all of the major ones solved. And as we do this budget adjustment going forward, we think this is sufficient to cover what we need to finish the 119. And I candidly, in 5 years of being here, I have not been able to say that before. And so I'm more confident today.
Yeah, and Brian, at least for myself, I understand that and appreciate that. And as I say, I know it was painful for us to go through that. But unlike, the management that does this day in, day out, sometimes the board just needs a little refresher.
Absolutely.
And an update on where we are. Because
Yes,
I,
ma'am.
for one, am comfortable with the process that we adopted based on our terrible experience of the past. So thank you.
Thank you.
And also, Brian, I'm also keenly aware that some of these change orders are a result of changes in scope because we demanded those changes. There also could be change orders as a result of time delays because rights of ways had not been secured. I get that. So it would be also good if when we get this refresher to get maybe a percentage breakdown of what type of change order are we dealing with? Are we dealing
Sure.
with change orders dealing because of scope changes that we
Yes.
made? Are we dealing with change orders because of time delays that were basically caused by not securing rights of way, et cetera? So I'm
Yeah.
fairly aware of that. I just want to get my arms around in more detail for that as to the status right now. But more importantly, what are we expecting in the future?
Perfect. We will. I am happy to prepare that for you, the board members, as well as the utility status that Director Perea asked for as well.
All right, thank you, colleagues.
Chair
yes.
Richards,
Yes.
I just wanted to say one thing that I agree with I'm sorry, I'm at an airport, but with what my board member, my fellow colleagues have said, but I also want to thank staff because I know that given this change order process, we know that it's been kind of our standard way of proceeding in these last few years because of the nature of how it started. And it is good, I think, to come back and refresh all of our memories every year or so about how we're doing it and what we're doing and what to expect, particularly given the uncertainty always of future. But I do want to say that on the F&A committee, we do get reports monthly about where we are on right of way, where we are on third party arrangements. And I think it would be a good idea to have those provided to the board. I think, as we already said, I agree with that, every month, because they are very, they're enlightening, and actually they're very encouraging. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Miller. Any other comments or questions? Let me just make one comment for the public more than the people on the board, because you're well aware of it. So through all of this, you hear a good deal of concern, and justifiably from not only management, but quite clearly our colleagues on the board. For the public, looking at the history of this, so how did this happen? There's nobody around the board here who would not have endorsed a process in which the construction of this project would not have followed the standards that you would expect in the construction and development industry. What happened here, for those of you who weren't not paying attention, but weren't aware, was that when the state of California accepted ARA funds from the federal government, that goes back to the Obama administration. Along with that acceptance was a requirement that those funds be expended by September of 2017. So in that period of time, there was no time to delay. The fact is that at that point, we did not have a fully, not even a close to a fully detailed and paid for right-of-way. We also didn't have the full design of what we were going to build. So what we did do is we moved forward so as to abide by the grant requirement of September of 17. And that all got complicated by, as many of you might recall, a number of lawsuits, which impacted the timing of the construction portion of what we were attempting to accomplish, as well as, and a number of those lawsuits, as you may recall, dealt with CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. So if you could put together in a big pot all the things that could come before any project, you have seen them all here. What you should not walk away from is believing or having any concern that it was done without anybody on the board recognizing the challenges. And given the alternatives of not having that requirement to complete the spending of the ARA funds by September 17th, I would tell you I feel confident that there's not one board member today or in the past who would have supported moving forward on the construction. It was the only way to abide by the grant agreements with the federal government to spend the money timely. That did occur, and it's cost everybody dearly. But what it's really cost in many ways is, and the biggest impact in my mind, is on the time impact analysis, the delays, which have been incredibly costly and are a part of the change order package. And those delays are the result of all the things that I mentioned before. Didn't have the design, didn't have the right-of-way, didn't have the CEQA approvals. Moving forward, and we used a contract for design or for construction called design build, that I would only speak for myself, but I believe around the table we'd find it we'd be very hard pressed to move forward with a design build concept for construction in the future. The idea was to basically transfer liability from the government to the private sector. And I would say that what we've proven is that doesn't work. So what you see going forward, and it's not that it's not in place now, we just haven't started new construction, but we have moved to define what it is that we are having to do and play catch up, doing out of sequence what should have been done before. So I've often thought, so did California benefit from anything? I think that it's clear that if you take into account the TIAs, that is the time delays, which are the most difficult for me to stomach, there was still substantial value to this project and to the state of California, which would be the way you would look at this to suggest, was it the right thing to keep the money or send it back to the federal government? So I think that we made the right decision. It's costly that it's taken so long to catch up. But that's kind of where we are, and I think where we're going. And so I don't want anybody out there to be concerned about the fact that these sorts of things are ongoing. These things occurred years ago and have caught up as a result of getting the project fully designed, changing right away where necessary, and it's been done in a number of places. And all those things ended up costing money. At the same time, the only way we could make September of 17 work is we had to have the contract signed and contractors out on the job. So when you can't provide to the contractors the tools in which to move forward, such as right-of-way, that's where one of the big ways that time impact analyses, that is delay chart costs, come about. So it's not that anything that we have done in the past was totally unknown. We've tried the best we could to manage it. And in the future, it's a whole lot better when we don't have to manage it because we don't start until we've got all of the various parts of the process of development and construction in the proper order and move forward only when we're ready to do so because we've got a project designed and a right-of-way purchased. So I think we are unified as a board with regards to how we got here, what we need to ensure that, and with management and staff, how we move forward without this occurring again. But I am confident that we clearly know the right way to do it. And we need to just finish where we have been in the past. And that's pretty well defined at this point. So with that, Mr. Horgan.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the specific impacts on the CP1 package, then CP23, and then CP4. So in the business plan 2022, we identified 8 significant commercial issues on CP1 that needed resolution. All of those have been resolved. In fact, the last one, Church Avenue, was resolved just 2 weeks ago. That is presently going through governance. Obviously, whilst we were negotiating these change orders, inflation was at an all-time high. Then we've had to add new scope as well. We had a sweeper package, which was originally intended to be a separate contract, and that was also added to the CP1 contract. Then we had the what we call the missing 2.5 miles. That was the 2.5 miles adjacent to SR 99. That included guideway and an intrusion barrier. So that's also been added to the CP1 contract. Then as we advanced utility designs and finalized discussions with third parties, that increased costs and time delays in several areas. Then obviously with all of these impacts, the contract end date has slipped. So we have the time impacts, which are, as Tom said, quite significant. Then we've also provided additional contingency for the above changes. Okay, on CP23, next slide, please. CP23, in the business plan 2022, there were 4 significant commercial issues identified. 3 of those have been resolved and are included in the contract. That is the Hanford Viaduct superstructure, the intrusion protection barrier, and Deer Creek. All of those are significantly advanced in construction as we speak. Cross Creek is in arbitration, and that the contractor will start construction on Cross Creek as well in the coming months. So inflation obviously has had an impact on all these change orders because they were all negotiated last year. Again, utility designs, impacts from freight railroads, third parties have increased scope and costs. Again, time impact associated with a new completion date, which is March 2026. And we've provided additional risk contingency for all of the above. Next slide, please. CP4, obviously, we're getting close to the end, but again, change orders that were negotiated in 2022 and increased escalation and inflation impacts. Utility designs, which are at 97% complete, have had an impact on costs and scope. And we've also made a provision for additional risk contingency based on the above. Now I'm going to hand you back to Brian Ennis.
You want to go home and shave first, or?
Yeah. A couple of financial tables I wanted to go through. The one you're seeing now, a summary of construction project cost increases. The current budget first is indicated for each CP specifically. I did want to clarify these CP budgets. The baseline budgets are not exclusively the design build contracts. They also include the right-of-way needed for these packages. They include, in some cases, some Caltrans work. If you remember, Caltrans delivered the Highway 99 relocation portion. And then we have also the project construction manager contracts and other contracts associated with our local partners, the freight railroads, some compensation we pay to the cities and other utilities in the area. We have the base of this construction package work of about 9.9 billion. Of our augmentation being requested today, we classify about 1.2 billion as being additional cost or known cost. These are the things that Daniel and others have mentioned in this presentation. The additional cost we'll have for the adjusted schedules, some of the additional utility work as those final utility relocations are being designed. So there's some additional dollars for those. And then just the final work we're not characterizing as major change orders, but just the final detail of completing the work.
So Brian, before you go on that figure of the additional cost, that includes the change orders?
That is correct. It would be adding 1.2 billion to the budget in known cost for the change orders and other costs associated with finishing the construction packages. So we're
and this figure is basically the additional costs, starting from the baseline of this December 21 budget authorization, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And obviously, in the past, there's some change orders that have already been approved and paid. And obviously in the future, there will be more change orders that will be approved and paid. All right. So for right now, based on this baseline of December 2021, the increase in change orders and whatever additional costs, known costs above budget, is that 1.1 billion total for all the CPs. So that's where you are counting, basically, for my clarity, that's where you are counting the change orders in that column, correct?
That's correct. And with the amendment that also includes some contract amendments that would be outside of the design build contracts.
Okay, no, yeah, I just wanted to know where exactly were we accounting for the change orders, and you just answered the question. Thank you, Brian.
Sure. The next column over, we have additional contingency. So these are dollars that when we apply our industry standard risk analysis to achieve we call it in the business plan, in the project update report, the probability 65 or P65 level. This is really the recommended standard for industry to budget additional dollars for risk. That's the 906 million. So the net change here from current budget, baseline budget to what's requested today is an addition of 2,073 million. That's the second to the last column, would bring the budget for the CP work, again, design build contracts and other contracts, to just shy of $12 billion on the far right. And then at the bottom of this table, we're indicating a accounting change here to reflect the $25 million raise grant award, where we'd formally bring in that additional $25 million of federal dollars into the baseline plan. Next
Mr.
slide.
Chairman, I have a question.
Go ahead, Director Perea.
Yeah, thank you. Brian, so I can understand, on CP1, the additional cost, 453 million. How does that number relate to the approximately 553 issues that are on this list that are utility issues that are either in progress or yet to be started? How does that number correspond to that number?
Well, I know there's AT&T issues, PG&E issues, excuse me. So those are, the staff estimates what we'll need to complete that work. And so that is part of this number. So
Okay.
the idea is that, completing those utilities is part of the 453 million.
Okay, but for the year, for this particular year, budget year, does that 453 million cover all of them or half of them or a quarter? I mean, I'm trying to get the relation between that number, the two numbers.
Sure. So just in context, in the Finance and Audit Committee material, we indicate how much is left in the baseline. So I believe for CP1, there's about 170 million left in the baseline contingency. We do have the change order coming forth, that the last one for CP1, Church Avenue. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, so Church Avenue is coming up. There's other small ones. So we're pretty close to exhausting our current CP1 contingency. So with this 453 million, we handle the work that's still needed in the future, including the estimates of what we need to fully complete the AT&T, PG&E, et cetera, those utility relocations, plus the design build work through completion, project construction manager work through completion. So that's in there. And then again, the next column, the 392 million is an indication of the P65 calculated contingency that's prudent for budgeting.
Okay, okay, so I'm clear, so I'm not confused moving forward. That additional $453 million should cover the cost for the remaining utilities on that list that we've provided.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right, next slide, please. This is similar information, just in a different format. This is just to suggest looking at our total existing expenditure authorization, 17.9 billion. We add this 2.1 billion as described on the prior page, and that would reset our total expenditure authorization at $20 billion, $10 million at the bottom. Next slide. This is a bar chart on our revenue, and this is provided to really respond to a question that might come on, do we have money to support this baseline expenditure budget? And the answer is yes. This is similar to a chart in the project update report. There's a couple different funding levels indicated with the arrows that point left on the top of this. Let me focus on the one in the middle, which is our cap and trade revenue. If cap and trade continues to come in as it has over the last year and a half, we would expect that our current funding in total is $25.2 billion. If a cap and trade falls and comes in lower than it has been coming in the last year and a half or so, we have a lower range, which is this 23.5 billion. But again, what's being requested here is a expenditure authorization of 20 billion. So we believe we're have sufficient funding to cover that. Next slide. I won't go over this slide in much detail. This is just how we allocate our different funding sources, from federal funds to cap and trade funds to Prop 1A bond funds across the different funding elements. Just highlight at the bottom here, we show this $20 billion new budget about the middle column of numbers. So this is just provided for additional detail on how we plan to use different colors of money for different project components. Next slide, please.
Okay, so what have we accomplished since the last request for budget authorization? Okay, CP4 contract, which I said is the most advanced, is on schedule for completion this summer. We've opened 12 overbridges over our alignment as well to traffic in 2022. We had a record construction labor on site in October of 22. That was 1,318 workers. We have also received revised baseline schedules from all CPs. At presently, we're doing a detailed analysis of the time impact assessments for CP1 and CP23. There's been, as outlined earlier, significant commercial issues on CP1 and CP23 have been negotiated and put into the contracts via change order. Our reliability, our right-of-way team under Dennis Kim have ensured greater reliability and delivery of right-of-way. So we got 96% of all parcels delivered to the design build contracts. Utility designs are approaching 90% complete, and relocations are now, as of this moment, they're actually 55% complete. We have, as Brian said earlier, we've implemented a task force for third parties and utilities. This task force has been in operation for the past 6 months, and they are focusing on all the significant utilities that require extra effort. Also, Brian Kelly has been engaging at an executive level with AT&T and PG&E to resolve issues. Okay, we've also developed closer and more effective working relationships with resource agencies to ensure that we are complying with all our environmental requirements. Next slide, please.
Let me ask a question, Daniel.
Yes, sir.
The first bullet point, CP4, is planned for completion in the summer of 2023. Last year in 22, we had anticipated, at least from the beginning of 22, that CP4 would be completed in 22. Now it's bleeding into 23 and 6 months into 23. Do we have a plan B in the event that it's not finished in 23?
Ernie, this is Brian. I just want to respond to that we had identified earlier a completion date for substantial completion of CP4 by March 1st of 2023. All of the 11 structures that we have in CP4 for our assets, for the things we need to build for the high-speed rail system, are substantially complete today. What we have finished, and has taken a little bit more time to finish, was negotiations with 2 irrigation districts, the North Kern Water District and the Semi-Tropic Water District, not on structures that are really ours, but on their structures that we need to move. And the process for us reconstructing those structures, getting designs approved by them, getting right-of-way agreed to by them. And I'm going to update this in the CEO report, but 2 necessary written agreements to get as a precursor to get that work done were just executed in February and March. And so that was the thing that pushed us a bit. The other thing that pushed us slightly was some of the wet weather in December and January pushed back some of the work that we had going on and caused some delay. But we believe now, with the execution of the written agreements with both Semi-Tropic and North Kern, our expectation is that we'll meet a summer 2023 substantial completion date, and then final completion, going through punch list and all that, will take a little bit more time. But that's where we are now, and we're more confident with those written agreements behind us.
Well, yeah, the substantial completion is a funny term, and I've been in the business for 40 some years, and that's always been we can knock out 90% of the construction, but it's the last 10% is the one that hangs us out. So if in fact we finish with the majority of CP4 with the work that we have to do will it delay us if we don't end or we don't complete it in 23? Can we get a cleanup contractor to come in and finish that work into 24 if that would be necessary?
Yeah, Ernie, I mean, I would just say that, remember, the other CPs are a bit later, so there's certainly some room between CP4 and the other ones. Although, and I would also say that there is some utility relocation work that we will be not using this contractor for, but another. What we've tried to achieve with this contractor and make sure that we can move forward on is getting enough of the guideway work done and completed and those assets so we can start to move forward on the installation of track.
Well,
And so
that was my
that's
concern.
the immediate thing that we are aiming for in 2023. And some of the almost peripheral or ancillary utility movements that are outside of that guideway. We've de-scoped some of that from this contractor and we'll do separately later because it's not necessary to move to track installation. So that's kind of the approach we've had on CP4 to date. And again, there is some room overall without much delay because the other CPs won't conclude until 26. But we do want to get track going as early as we can, and CP4 is clearly going to finish well in front of the other two.
Well, that was my concern. I guess my question was, will this delay the track and we can begin track anyway and finish the rest of the work outside of that?
Yes. I mean, the short answer to that is yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Brian, what is the substantial completion date for CP 1, 2, and 3?
Missed the
The
question.
completion dates are CP 1 and 2 and 3.
Yeah, the substantial completion date right now for CP4 is, we're saying summer because we're working through mitigating some schedule with the contractor. We're hoping to bring that into the end of June or early July. On 1 and 2, 3, we are in the negotiation now on what we call the final time impact analysis. We've received and conditionally approved a schedule from CP1 that is December of 25. And we've received and approved a conditionally approved a schedule from the contractor on 2, 3 that is March of 26. And we are going through some review of that. Again, conditionally approved it. We are going through some review of that with the contractor now, so it'll settle one way or the other, couple of months in one direction or the other. And so that's why for now and in the project update report, we just said 2026 without getting more specific because we're in the final settlement discussions, which we hope to conclude in the April-May timeframe. But 26 is what we're saying. I'm confident it'll be 26. Some might move up to 25, but again, that's some of the things that we are in negotiations with in real time.
Thank you.
Mr. Horgan, go ahead, please.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what do we tend to do? What are we planning to do to deliver on time and on budget, which is obviously everybody's aim on a project to deliver on time to budget. So we've got a whole list of goals on the left-hand side. Okay, finish to schedule, finish to budget, maintain high quality, and I'll talk more about these in a moment. Maintain our good safety record, ensure that we fully comply with all our environmental requirements, and obviously get some more positive publicity for the program. So how are we going to do this? One of the things we're going to do, and Dennis Kim is leading this initiative with third parties, we are going to have much greater detail on our analysis of progress on third parties. This is significant because third parties and utility relocations are really the number one thing we need to get done to complete this job on time. So we are working at that. Dennis has got a plan for a significant database, which will help us move forward. And as Brian said earlier, we have increased governance. So the Change Control Committee has been enhanced even more, so much so that now it also looks at every directive letter in case that directive letter would have a significant cost impact. We're also looking at the third-party task force, which is up and running. It's proving to be very effective. And we're going to engage more at an executive level with not alone PG&E and AT&T, but Brian is also going to be starting to engage with the freight railroads. That's BNSF and Union Pacific Railroad. Okay, then we're going to, in terms of Quality. Quality is obviously a very important issue for us. So we have changed how we're implementing quality management. It used to be that because it was a design build contract, it was more supervision, was more witnessing, but now we're doing our own independent inspection and testing, and we are engaging much more significantly with the contractor and playing a very active role, and that's being headed up by our new Director of Engineering, Brian Maroney. So that's a significant activity to ensure that we get the quality that we need. Okay, another initiative which is about to start, it has started in the quality area, is basically training all our staff to a higher standard and providing continuous evaluation. So we've already rolled out training in quality inspection, and we're going to roll out training in other areas as well in the coming year. Okay, and obviously, final issue is to achieve scope definition. So we are getting very close to final scope definition, and we want to finalize the scope definition in the coming months. Thank you.
Daniel, if I can just add one thing, that the other thing that I just don't want to miss is that, again, this is relative to where we've been on the 119, but and I appreciate the comment from Director Escutia earlier that our focus is getting the 119 done. To be very clear, that is the first thing that we owe the federal government, who gave us significant money to get that work done. So we are focused on getting that done. But as we look forward to the next construction elements, be they the track and systems element or the extensions, you know, we are keenly focused on getting as much of the risk defined earlier in the process and mitigated and addressed earlier in the process, well before we're in the construction or the procurement element. And I just can't emphasize enough how important that I think that is to make sure that we deliver things in a way that is much more efficient and more successful going forward. So we have an opportunity to do that, and we're taking the steps now to make sure we do that. So I just want to add those points. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Well, and, that concludes the presentation. We do have an additional slide just reiterating the what's in the recommended board resolution. So we're requesting board approval to adjust the baseline or the expenditure authorization to $20 billion, $10 million.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ennis. Colleagues on the board, we'll start off. Do we have a motion for approval?
I'll move approval.
Director Williams, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Director Perea. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller, Vice Chair Miller,
We might have lost her.
Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gilmetti,
Yes.
Director Escutia, Director Escutia, Director Williams,
Aye.
Director Cohen.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion carries.
All right, thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Moving on to the next item on our agenda. We will move on to our CEO report, Mr. Kelly.
I think the next item is the,
I'm sorry, I
yeah, you
jumped
can.
over it. It's only because it was so thick.
You're welcome.
The economic impact analysis report. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Richard and board members. My name is Derek Bowden. I'm with the Authority's Financial Office. I'm here today to present the 21-22 economic impact analysis. The Authority continues to make substantial, impactful investments into this project and to the state of California.
Is it possible you get a little bit closer to your?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Lean forward a little bit. The Authority is proud of this investment and that this project has made economically to the men and women of the state, and to the hundreds of small businesses supported by this project, and to the billions invested in disadvantaged communities up and down the state. So that the Since 2017, the authority has produced the economic impact analysis reports, and we produce them every year. We have analyzed all the fiscal year expenditures since 2006. So this report I'm going over today is for the 21-22 fiscal year, so ending in June 22. We also include a forecast for future economic impacts that are based on the 2023 project update report data. Next slide, please. So we have three main indicators that we capture in our analysis. The first is job years. They are the equivalent of number of one-year-long jobs supported by the project. For example, one employee working for 5 years is 5 job years, or 5 employees working for 1 year is also 5 job years. That's different than the jobs created number that we tout at the authority. I think the number is 10,000 currently. Job years takes into account a length of time. So for a project like ours that is lengthy, it's important to capture economically the value of these jobs over a lengthy period of time. The second impact is labor income, which includes all forms of employment income, including compensation, your wages, benefits, and payroll taxes that firms have paid to employees, and income earned by self-employed workers or unincorporated sole proprietorships. And finally, we have the big one, which is economic output, which is an estimate value of all the value of economic activity taking place as a result of our investment. A dollar invested in high-speed rail sparks several activities in addition to labor income, such as the purchase of goods and services, and value created from these activities. Next slide. So in order to come up with our impacts, there's 3 main effects that we calculate or capture through our modeling. They are direct effects, which essentially is our authority's direct investment into employees or our contractors through salaries or manufacturing or production. And then conversely, indirect effects is the next level down, where the contractors, for example, purchase concrete or steel or supplies or transportation. And then finally, we have induced effects, which essentially is the money spent by the contractors and high-speed rail employees on your housing, groceries, retail, that type of thing. So it's the ripple of the economy from our investment. Next. Just a little bit about our research methods. So we gather historical invoice data from the prior 3 fiscal years to determine the project activity, where there's construction, support, professional services, that type of thing. And also quite an important aspect of this analysis is the geographic location. We apply these impacts where they are spent and where they're invoiced to the project. So that's what the deep dive of the invoices allows us to apply the benefits where they occurred up and down the state. And since we have consistently produced this report with consistent methods, we continue to tout our peer reviews that we received back in 2017 from UOP, Department of Finance, Department of Labor, our peer review group, amongst others. Next slide. So what we've analyzed to date is this big chart or big bar on the right. So $9.8 billion of investment from 2006 until June of 2022. So that's our program expenditures over that time. That's what we've analyzed for the first part of the impacts. Next slide. One of the things, like I said earlier, we're really proud about is the investment into disadvantaged communities. So California recognizes specific geographic areas as disadvantaged communities based on a series of indices that include pollution, burden, sensitive populations, and socioeconomic factors. Disadvantaged communities are defined as those that score in the top 25% of the most impacted by pollution and socioeconomic conditions. So this bar chart at the bottom here shows our annual impact or investment into disadvantaged communities. To date, all told, it's about 56% of our total investment has fallen into these disadvantaged community areas, which is a major investment when you're considering $9.8 billion invested so far. Next slide. So since 2006 until June of 2022, we've had 80,000 job year support on this project, with over 9,700 of them coming last year alone. Next slide. So this chart shows the increase of the job years by fiscal year, again, getting us to the 80,000 mark on the right, with 9,700 coming from this last fiscal year analyzed. Next slide.
For the same time period, 2006 till 2022, we've had $6 billion of labor income, with 830 million occurring in last year alone. Thank you. Does this work? Oh, it really does. Okay. The next slide. So this graph here, again, similar to the other one, shows the labor income over the last fiscal years to get us to 6.0 billion. Last year, again, $830 million impacted. Next slide. So again, all told for our investment as of June 2022, we've had $16 billion of economic output throughout the state, with $2.3 billion coming last year. Next slide. And this chart here shows the economic impacts by fiscal year. Again, we're up to $16 billion, which is a pretty impressive number, with $2.28 billion coming last year. Next slide. This is one of the best parts of this analysis, which again, applying our impacts up and down the state geographically. Through our data mining, we apply these impacts where they occurred kind of in real time. So we analyze these regions, Sacramento region, Bay Area, Central Valley, Southern California, and then the rest of the state. Logically, the Central Valley is where most of the activity or the largest activity has occurred. To date, we've supported about 34,500 job years in Central Valley, with about $6.4 billion of investment there. Next slide. And then the second half of our analysis are future projections. So we've, like I said earlier, we projected based on the 2023 per data by segment. So you have the Central Valley segments here, Merced, Fresno, and Fresno, Bakersfield, for a combined total of 323,000 job years, and then $64.8 billion of economic output. Next slide. Northern California, San Francisco to San Jose to Merced, again, 229,000 job years with $48.5 billion projected output. Next slide. And then Southern California, from Bakersfield to LA to Anaheim. So we got 302,000 job years projected with $68.2 billion of economic output. Next slide. So all told, again, based on the 2023 per data, we have a total phase one estimated impact of 855,000 job years with an economic output of $181.4 billion. Next slide. So to wrap up, we continue to see our investments ripple through the economy, again, up and down the state, a large portion of it in the disadvantaged communities. We support jobs across all functions, from environmental clearance and engineering, construction, planning. Over half, like I said, 56% of them coming in disadvantaged communities, which is a key number for us, especially for our use of cap and trade funds. In the Central Valley region alone, there's again $6.4 billion in economic activity that's benefited the region and its workers. Next slide.
Yeah, Derek.
Yes.
Yeah, Ernie Camacho. One of the slides, I think in slide 7, and I think you make reference here that that we're spending 50 to 64% of the annual expenditures are in the disadvantaged communities. How is that broken out?
So basically, when we gather our geographic data on where this money is being invested, it's a little bit different than just looking at the expenditures in our F&A items, because our data is gathered by where the invoices are sent to and the authorities' investments are paid to. So we overlay that distribution against the disadvantaged communities map. So that's where we see there's a page in our economic impact report, the full report that's linked at the end of this presentation, that kind of shows our layout of our expenditures with the disadvantaged communities where they're laid. So they're basically a lot of our alignment, especially our current work, are in a large part of the disadvantaged community area. So that's how we kind of get to that number.
But in the Central Valley, or in Fresno area, or any one of those areas, if you're saying 50 to 64% of the annual expenditures are occurring there, Is that contractual? Is that benefits to the community, improvements to the community? One of the things that we probably don't do enough of is take credit for the things that how we're improving these community. Is that part of those dollars that you're spending?
Yeah, it's direct invested dollars. So it's not solely contractual. It's not pledged. It's actual dollars spent. So these communities are getting direct benefits and investment from this project to these local areas. And I said it ripples through the economy and has produced, a lot of economic benefit to these areas. So yeah, it is solely money paid out to date.
Could you get us a breakout, not now, but at a later date, get us a breakout as to where those dollars were actually spent?
Yes, we have it in whatever kind of format you request, we pretty much produce. So we can get it in any geographic area you want.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So the last slide is really just a links to our different projects. And I wanted to thank the team that helped produce this. Our state staff and our consultants, KPMG, Steer, WSP, they've lended their expertise and their experience with this. So it's been a nice combined effort. And we have any other questions on this? Okay.
I was answering a board member, so anyway, any questions for the economic impact analysis? Yes, please, Director
It's
Williams.
probably more of a comment than a question, but first of all, thank you for this. It's always helpful to see the immediate economic impact.
Yes.
Obviously, we're still in the construction phase of this project. Ultimately, we all know we will get to an operational phase of this project. And I was just struck. So I'm struck by seeing this and how impactful this is to see the economic activity that happens again in part of a state, the largest number being in that Central Valley. I think it was Kern. I can't remember the exact location, but at any rate, it reminded me of what I saw when I participated in an international conference last year on high-speed rail and the economic impacts that have occurred throughout the world where these projects have successfully launched. And I was struck in particular by Japan, where, like here in California, it started out in small segments around the country. And historically, when you look at, and I wish I'd love to be able to share it with my colleagues, but you look at essentially a heat map of that project that is developed over time. And as it became operational, the economic impact of those regions of the country increased dramatically. So you brought a major transportation system on the ground that people could use that stimulated regional economic growth, other rail and other forms of transportation that connected to it, that expanded those economic hotspots around the country, where in the early 60s, they were focused in the major cities like Tokyo and some of the other major cities. As you saw that system expand outward and connect the country, you saw that economic impact, spread out across the country. So I'm very hopeful as a kid of the Central Valley. I can't wait to see the change. Let's take a picture right now of the economic heat map of California, and you'll see it clustered in the Bay Area, Southern California, which is great. I live in Southern California, but I'm looking forward to, once we have this system fully operational, and seeing not that those areas diminish, but that the economic activity increases in the Central Valley, and we have a system and we have a much more dispersed heat map of economic activity in California. So thank you for this. This is showing the early potential of that, just in terms of the construction. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that is a good point as well. It is the estimates that we provided are based on construction costs only. The financial office is in process of estimating impacts of operations as well in the future. So we'll hopefully have some along those lines shortly. for our grants as well. But yeah, these large numbers are great. They are solely on, construction. So yeah, the additional cost for operations is going to be amazing to see.
Thank you.
Yeah, Derek, Brian Kelly, and this is probably my question was kind of the dovetail on what Anthony was saying, is that we aren't taking advantage of the wins that are occurring in the community. So we need to be able to demonstrate and to promote the things that we're doing and the things that we're accomplishing from high-speed rail. And I think that we're losing some opportunities by not doing that. If we could start to measure the economic impact, that may be very helpful to our cause.
Agreed.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Boughton, great job. Thank you very much. All right, now, Mr. Kelly.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman? Yes. Good.
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members, I'm going to do a presentation just on the CEO report, which I do at each of our hearings, and I'm hoping that this one will focus a little bit on one of the biggest things that we need to collectively, both the board, management, our stakeholder groups, and others need to focus on as a high priority for us in 2023, and that is our pursuit of federal funds to get our work done. As the board knows, and as we have briefed with the board before, the advancement and the enactment of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA, presents a remarkable opportunity for the authority. The first I've seen really since the ARA grants that occurred now some 14 or 15 years ago. So it's been a while. But with the passage of the IIJA, we have a great opportunity to reestablish that important partnership with the federal government to assure we can move our work going forward. So I did want to spend some time with the board members and make you aware of what we're doing, what's pending at the federal government now, and what grants and the structure of the grant applications that we'll be pursuing as we go forward. I also want to thank Brian Annis, a whole group of folks, Sheila Dezarn and Barbara Gillihan and others. We have new folks helping us in the grant area now. But this is a really important place for the authority over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. And so I wanted to, again, spend time on this and talk about how we are pursuing federal funds in this really once in a generation opportunity. So let's move to the next slide. So the first slide here is to let you know what is pending. We started applying for grants. I mean, once the IIJA was on the radar screen, the instruction from me to the staff here is we're not going to let a federal NOFO or NOFA opportunity, notice of funding opportunity, or notice of funding, what's a NOFA? Availability. Thank you. But any NOFO or NOFA opportunity was going to pass without us participating. And what we identified originally in the IIJA was about 6 different discrete funding grant programs that were relevant to this program. Some of them were focused on grade separations. Some of them were focused on station development. Some of them were focused on just capital investments. So we identified about 6, and the authorization for those 6 programs over the next 5 years amount to about $75.5 billion authorized. Appropriated to date is just under $40 billion. So there's a great opportunity for us to go after these funds. So we started this in 2022. We've been awarded 2 grants, 2 raised grants to date for a total of $49 billion. I'll take the B. Now, before $49 million that has helped us with discrete advancements on some of the work that we're doing. And we have pending now what you see on this chart here on this slide, which is under the Rail Crossing Elimination Agreement and something called the Consolidated Rail Safety CRISI grants. We have applied for a combined amount of just about $300 million for the design and construction of some grade separations in the city of Shafter. This is actually the beginning of capital investments south as we would head into Bakersfield, but we have this opportunity, and so we identified these as a place for some of the specific grade separation projects that are in front of us. Also part of the CRISI grant in 2022 is a grant request to get federal money for a workforce training facility we have in Selma that Director Perea and Director Richards were key in establishing. The authority has spent about $1 million roughly a year to participate in the worker training in that facility. We want to extend that indefinitely, so we're applying for about $2 million more from the federal government. It's been visited by the FRA administrator, who was very positive about what we're doing there. And so we've asked for some federal funds to see that going, and we're willing to commit additional dollars from the authority to see that happen. We've also got a raise grant pending now for the Fresno Historic Depot, which is some improvement to the existing facility there, an historic building that needs some seismic upgrades, but can also be available for some community events and community activity before we're actually in full service there. So pending right now at the federal government, about $325 million in grant applications. Let me move to the next slide.
Wait, wait,
Sure.
before you go there, Brian,
Mhm.
if I may.
Mhm.
Well, it says I can't start the video, but okay, so I'll just go like this. Usually when I hire lobbyists, to represent USC, I always get an advocacy plan. So I'm assuming that you have an advocacy plan by our federal lobbyists as to who they're going to lobby, goals and timetables, and just really identify the boots on the ground. The reason why I think that's critical is because if we get a sense as to who they're lobbying and when, especially if it involves some congressional members, some of us have access to some of those congressional members, and we might be able to supplement your efforts.
Director Scuti, I appreciate that point, and I just want to say that we are developing now an advocacy plan, a broad advocacy and stakeholder involved plan for the grant applications, particularly focused on not less the ones that are pending right now, but really what we're heading to in 2023, which is by the end of April, I think it's April 21st, we have the application due for what's called the federal state program, which I'm going to get into in just a minute here. But as we do that, that application from us is going to be large. It'll be in the billions. We have already done significant work with the FRA on what that will look like, which is the chart that I want to pull up right now. But to speak to your specific point, we will be coming back to you all and talking to you about how we advocate. What I wanted to do, because I think it's a better approach, is to get as specific as we can about the ask. In other words, get our application put together, make sure everybody understands exactly what we're asking for, and then put in place a broad advocacy plan that will involve everybody on this board, our management team, the board, our stakeholder groups, as well as our representation in Washington. So I do appreciate the question. And as we develop the specific grant application, we will be coming forward with an advocacy plan that will accompany that.
All right, thank you.
Sure. So this chart looks a little bit complicated, but I want to, because there's a lot of color and letters, but I want to simplify this as much as we can. On the left column there, where you see the yellow dots, that is all of the work between, or the geographical locations kind of north to south between Merced and Bakersfield. And the blue box at the top are the different phases of construction. So you see environmental approval is the far left, advanced design to 30%, right-of-way, final design to 100, construction, track and systems. These are all the components that we'll need to get an operating system, not just for testing on the 119 miles, potential operations sooner, but ultimately to operate the system between Merced and Bakersfield, the full 171 miles. And so what this shows is, if you look at the middle section, Madera to Poplar Avenue, which is the 119 miles, the dark green is what's been completed, and the dark green and light green combined is what's funded and already underway. So you can see that much of the Madera to Poplar Avenue work is advancing, and we're at least funded through the first track of track and systems. Our initial application, which is identified on here as the letter A, as we get to the April application for the first round of the federal state funding, we are intending to seek dollars for all of these elements that are part of the letter A. So what that means is, in the first round of applications, we will seek funding for right-of-way and other early work and for the final design to 100% for both the Merced and Bakerfield extensions. We will seek funding for the track and systems for the second track. Those are the 3 A's on the right side, the second track on the 119 miles. And then we're also seeking funding for all of the train sets that we will need, or federal funding for train set procurement, which we will need for both testing and ultimate operations. We want to get train sets in this now because trains are a long lead item. They take some time to manufacture. We want to get trains available to us in time for testing on a 2028 timeline and operations as early as we can in the 2030 timeline. So that is A. And then B is just the next year. How we expect the federal government to do this program is each year they'll put out a new round of notice of funding opportunities or availability. And in the first phase is A. B, the letter B indicated by the sort of tan color toward the top of the fourth row under civil construction. That's what we will focus on in our next round of seeking funds, and that is for the civil construction work north toward Merced. And as we get to the next round the following year, phase C will cover things like construction toward both Merced and Bakersfield and additional track for each of those segments and so forth. So at the bottom is phases A, B, C, D, and D1 and 2. And each of it is us to ultimately get, so this entire chart would be green, complete. And we need, and we've indicated in the project update report, that we need federal funding to get there. And we've been very clear about that. And our objective and our goal is over the course of the next 5 years, we have a goal of achieving about $8 billion in federal funds for this. Our initial application for the federal state program, I mentioned that we have $300 million pending now. The federal state program, we will apply for on the order of about $3 billion, just under about 2.8. And again, that'll be for all the things that are on A. The other thing I think I want the board to know is that this chart has been the product of communication we've had between our staff and the Federal Railroad Administration. And some of us, board chairman and myself and Brian Annis, were at a meeting last October with the U.S. Department of Transportation where we talked about what was then a mega grant application we had. The mega grant didn't go particularly well for the state of California. But the good thing was immediately after that meeting, the FRA reached out to us and said, what we need is an understanding of how you guys will apply for money over the next 5 years, what you will apply it to, and what your milestones and deliverables will be. And that's what this chart reflects. And I would just say that to date, it's been very well received by the FRA. It is the product of that communication over the last several months, and it really does reflect our strategy going forward. Next slide, please. Again, I may have verbalized all of this already, so I'll move through it really quickly. But again, we developed this grant strategy to leverage available state matching funds to maximize the federal awards. A couple of things about this project that make it uniquely qualified for and a good candidate for federal funding now is, aside from all the benefits, including those economic benefits that you just heard about, is that the project now is these elements of the project are well through the environmental process. We're into design, and for much of this, we're into construction. And what that means is the federal dollars we get, we can put to work immediately. There's no waiting for another approval phase. These dollars can get to work. So that's an important element for us. The other thing that's important to know about particularly the federal state program is there's a large segment of the United States, the Northeast Corridor, there's a lot of rail and a lot of transit that I don't expect to play very much in this program going forward because that geographic area got a separate amount of money in the IIJA just for that program. So we will not be competing with everybody from the Northeast Corridor for the remaining available funds. Again, we worked this through with the FRA staff in terms of what our process looks like. We've targeted $8 billion in federal awards over the 6 programs over the course of the next 5 years. We have match money through cap and trade funding and some of the bond funds, but again, mostly cap and trade funding going forward. Currently in California, we are spending, the state of California is funding 85% of this program. And this is a federal state program. And usually federal state funded projects have a much more equitable share distribution between the feds and the state. If we get everything we want out of this program in terms of what we are applying for, California will still be funding about 65% of the program. So again, we think our ask is fair. We think it's equitable, and it's our ability to match the federal funds, again, make us a very strong candidate for these dollars. We have available funds to match and put these dollars to work. I mentioned that the Phase A priority list, including the work on the 119-mile segments, the double track, funding train sets, getting right-of-way and other early work done on the Merced extensions. This is primarily what our grant application will be focused on as we go forward. Next slide. Again, this is just another slide that shows some of the deadlines for the grant applications that are in front of us in 2023. The first one is coming up very quickly. It's a smaller program. It's really for getting corridors, early planning dollars, if you will, into corridors that we know we'll be interested in. So we're applying, it's a $500,000 relatively small planning one to get into what's called the Corridor ID program. And it's at least an acknowledgement by the federal government that we will be working together on corridor development. So some of our future corridor things will be part of that, whether it's finishing Bakersfield and Merced or extending to some of the other sections. We want to get these corridors in the priority list for future funding. So that's the March 27th deadline. I mentioned the federal state one. This is the biggest pot in the IIJA, and all applicants have to be intercity rail providers. That application is due April 21st. We are in the development of that now. And then future rounds of all of those bipartisan infrastructure law programs will help us fund phases B through D on the chart that I showed earlier. And again, those will, as those come forward, we will again be very active. No NOFA or NOFA will go forward without us being participants in that. And so fundamentally, that's where we are. That's our approach right now to federal funding. I want to pause here before I go on with the rest of the CEO report and just ask and see if there's any questions for the board.
Any questions for our CEO thus far?
Yeah, Brian, one quick question. On the grant funds, are we also going to be competing against our neighboring state in Brightline?
Yeah, I anticipate, Brightline, when it first came forward, you might recall, Ernie, was going to be a private only operator and developer of that project. And I think what they've seen and what we've seen with other high-speed rail projects around the globe and certainly around the country, trying to do this stuff private only is difficult because the capital needs are so big. So I am expecting that Brightline will be an applicant for some of these funds. And I believe they'll likely apply through the Nevada Department of Transportation, not through California. But I do think they will also be an applicant for funds here.
Well, I mean, realizing that they are going to take the I-15 to Rancho Cucamonga and be able to hook up with the Metrolink, which is using, a lot of the things that we have helped develop. And so it's disheartening to see that that we have another neighbor competitor.
Yeah, although I would say just something that's a little bit different. Their route is not along our alignment. It's their own alignment. They're going east to west. Ours is the north to south from NorCal to Southern California. And again, it's electrified high-speed rail, which is generally supported here. I do think, what's important to us is that we achieve things that are efficient together, like interoperability of equipment, interoperability of station requirements and things like that. For that future where we may be sharing some stations and they may be even sharing some routes. We're not there yet, but I see a future where operational considerations for the two of us are going to have to be combined and considered.
They'll also be able to share ridership.
No doubt, especially where there are places like Palmdale, if they're coming from the east and at the stop there, we're bringing folks from the north or the south there, it becomes ridership benefit of meeting in a single location with the two different routes get really beneficial to both parties. And so there's reasons to figure that out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well,
Brian, you had been,
Hello, Brian?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Ernie, were you not finished? Hello?
Go ahead, Lynn. I think Ernie was
Okay,
finished.
thanks, Brian. Well, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds about our conversation yesterday, but building on what Martha said about an advocacy plan, as I said yesterday, the advocacy team is going to be pretty critical. And, you know, it's never just one person for one agency or decision maker. And it's really critical that we be very strategic in the team that we put together. It doesn't have to be something for the next 10 years, but certainly for this go round,
Yes.
we need to take a fresh look at the whole team.
Agreed.
Brian, I just have one quick question, and you may have covered this before, but why did Brightline pivot to where they're going now as opposed to Palmdale?
They were never, their initial operating run was from not quite Palmdale, but Victorville to Las Vegas. And, you know, I think candidly, for lack of a better term, they had trouble selling bonds and getting investors to invest with that ridership number between Victorville and Vegas. And I think pivoting to Rancho Cucamonga gave them a better ridership portfolio, improved things from an investment level. And I think that's primarily why they made that move.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on the federal strategy? No. Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll roll quickly through one more item and then just a note, a sort of personal note for the board. I did mention, and I just wanted to update the construction package 4, as I know we've talked about certainly in F&A committee and in prior board presentations like last month. We're working really hard to get the CP4 package to final completion. I want to recognize and thank the legal team and Dennis Kim and his work as real property and the head of the third-party agreement team. They really executed in the last month 2 key written agreements we had to get done, utility agreements with irrigation districts, the North Kern Water Storage District and the Semi-Tropic Water Storage District. Both of these have facilities that we need to move to make sure that we can come through that area. We have to also preserve their very important work that they do on supplying water to growers in that area. And so it's been a delicate conversation. It's been long in coming. It's been a tough negotiation, but getting these agreements done, both with the North Kern Water District and Semi-Tropic, will help us advance. This is work, again, not on our facilities, but on theirs. And it's important that this work got done. And with these agreements, we're confident that we can move forward on the construction. So it's very important stuff, and I wanted to acknowledge that. And then lastly, I just wanted to make a note on an unfortunate development, if you will, that came to my attention last Thursday on March 9th. And that was news that we had lost a consultant who worked very closely with our staff on this project. And I wanted to just acknowledge the work of Peter Humphreys, who came to us through WSP, but did a lot of work for this program on the commercial side. Peter suffered a heart attack. I believe it was on Thursday, March 9th. That's when I was notified, and he passed. And I wanted to just spend a moment to acknowledge that he worked on this project for several years in the commercial space. In the interactions I had with Peter, I found his counsel invaluable, but to the authority and to me on commercial issues, including how we properly value change orders and things that are in front of us. There's a lot of commercial analysis that goes into that. And again, in my experience, I found his counsel to be smart, always well analyzed, and very well presented. And in short, he just inspired confidence in me. And I felt like when I got input from Peter, I felt really good about where we were going and how we were going to solve an issue. And so his loss is a great loss to the authority, and it's deeply felt by both state staff and his consultant colleagues. And I just wanted to acknowledge his great work. I also wanted to publicly express my sincerest and deepest condolences to his family and his loved ones. And I wanted to ask Mr. Chairman, with your approval, if we could adjourn today's meeting in Peter's memory. So thank you.
We shall, and thank you very much for all of that. And our thoughts also from the board members to his family.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any further questions or comments for Mr. Kelly? Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, Brian. We'll just very quickly go over just some of the numbers that we reviewed today on the Finance and Audit Committee meeting with regards to the project. Very quickly, in terms of cash available, we've got these numbers, by the way, are as of January the 31st. Cash available about 1.7 billion. 1.6 of that is from cap and trade. What's not included in the January numbers is the result of the November and then the result of the February auction of cap and trade. The expectations are that the authority will receive approximately 239 million from November auction and approximately 221 million from the February auction. In addition to that, the Treasurer's Office is in the process of issuing commercial paper and selling Proposition 1A bonds, which is expected to bring to the authority over the next several months about an additional $1.5 billion. The administration budget for the authority in January the spent was $6 million. It's about $1 million higher than the same month the previous year. The basis for that is the filling of about 45 vacant positions on the authority staff. Capital outlay for the month of January was 81.2 million, of which 63.8 of that were our design build expenditures. The preliminary numbers, and these are preliminary for the month of February, the 81.2 billion or million, excuse me, that we spent in January is expected to be about 102.5 million. The contingency summary, which will be impacted by the action that the board took earlier today for contingency, we had at the end of January 271 million. With that expenditure authorization that the board acted on today, that will be adjusted, and those new numbers will be represented in next month's reporting to you. Labor was lower in January, likely the result of the weather, down to 874 workers was on the site per average daily, a decrease of about 90 from the month before. There are only 86 at the end of January, 86 parcels remaining to be purchased. 2,213 have been purchased and delivered out of a total of 2299, which are necessary, or in other words, 96% of the total requirement by the authority for the CP 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. Utility relocations completed are at 53%. We've had some discussion on this earlier in this meeting, so I won't belabor that at this point. Any questions on any of that from any of my colleagues? All right, hearing none, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to adjourn to a closed session. After that closed session, which we're expecting to last approximately 20 minutes, I'll come back out and report to you on any findings that we may or may not have had that need to be reported to the public. So in about 20 minutes, hopefully that will occur. If you would like to wait, you can get an update on that at that point. With that, we will now adjourn to I think somewhere upstairs, to a closed session, and we'll be back hopefully in about 20 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is California High-Speed Rail Authority Board of Directors meeting. We have just concluded a board closed session, and the board, there was no action taken, and we have nothing to report. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. We'll see you hopefully next month. Have a good weekend. The meeting is adjourned.